Welcome everyone. We are going to cover a live Q&A today on all things bone stress injury, and hopefully we cover a little bit about what that actually is and a little background to it because we aren't all physios in this room, and also our place in nutrition and what to consider if you're a practitioner and not a dietitian joining. Welcome as well. I think the big thing here is like covering the background and the multifaceted approach to bone stress injury. I think we'll all agree that when we look at bone stress injury, there are absolutely non-modifiable factors to bone stress injuries, but there's lots of modifiable ones that we can all play a part in, I guess, being doing some really great stuff in prevention, but also in the treatment and hoping to prevent re-injury as well. So I guess to start, for those who I haven't met, my name's Alicia. I'm an advanced sports dietitian. I am co-founder of Compeat Performance and also Compeat Academy alongside our Compeat Academy guru, Kirsten, who books me in for these sessions. And then I say yes, and I get them done. So thank you so much, Kirst. I was saying before this started that I've actually really enjoyed delving into this topic. I was a bit nervous, just because it's not something you talk about all the time, but bone stress injury is something I work with a lot of the time. So I found it quite therapeutic to go through, get a little bit more confidence that I did know what I was talking about, and it hasn't changed that much. And I'm really excited to kind of chat through this because when we're looking at bone stress injury, it's really interesting, the numbers, right? Because I think we talk a lot about, say, ligament injury, soft tissue, all those types of things, but bone stress injury actually makes up anywhere from 10 to 30% of injuries in sports and of the referrals given to sports medical in terms of medicine and physio. So I think it's an important topic, and I think we have actually really have a place to part to play. Oh my God. Anyway, it's also school holidays, everyone, so I'm getting through kind of navigating kids at home and trying to work. So apologies if my sentences don't work so much today. A part to play in nutrition and also the considerations and collaborations with all the performance support team, sports science, sports medicine in the management, but also the prevention. So let's first of all just like set a little bit of a ground of what we mean by bone stress injury, or BSI, which you'll see it noted as in a lot of notes, updates, and papers. It's a continuum. So similar to how we talk about relationship with food and disordered eating to eating disorder, there's like one side of this continuum which is like normal optimized bone, and then it moves into a stress response, which is usually not actually symptomatic, but could be picked up on imaging, which then moves into a bony stress reaction that then, if left and not treated, ends up as a bone stress fracture. So the same with disordered eating disorder continuum is the longer it gets to that pointy, acute, severe level, the longer recovery takes. So very similar way of thinking in this continuum. If we allow it to get to a bone stress fracture, the recovery and rehab of that takes a whole lot longer. So I feel like that just helps to translate it into language we know already in the nutrition space to an injury space of the bone. So as I mentioned at the start, it's actually really significant and like a percentage of injuries in sports people. So if we are comfortable and confident in this area in the nutrition approach, I'm just going to do an intro today. This is half hour. We will absolutely have question time at the end. There will be so much that I don't cover today, so hopefully it just sparks your curiosity. We cover so much more content in the Academy courses and community. So please, if you're not a member already, we would love for you to join. There's lots of different options with memberships depending on your financial situation or how much info and connection you're after. So yeah, we would love for you to join us. So I think the other thing is to just appreciate how this stress response occurs, and it's an imbalance. So it's an imbalance between the remodeling and the micro damage. So when we're training, putting load on that bone, we're doing that micro damage, and this turnover, if it's imbalanced with the remodeling, will create that reaction and response into a fracture. So if you think about that of like, what kind of part do I play in assisting the body in keeping up with that balance and the remodeling, then it starts to give you clues on what you can do with your athletes in terms of prevention, but also then in treatment as well. So we'll cover a bit of that today. I just realized in the video how much I'm sweating. This room is really warm and it's a bit humid, so apologies. I'm not looking my best. So if we look at the risks, some of them in terms of like, say, the nutrition space, if we're dietitians chatting here, are non-modifiable in what we can manage. But I think being across all the different facets that we can talk to our different colleagues on is really, really important. So if we're looking at biomechanical, that's things like the training load, the speed that training load and has been increased, those types of things, the length of recovery between sessions. Biomechanical in terms of the shoes that have been worn, what kind of turf they're running on, what kind of biomechanics they're actually using in terms of form. All that is really, really relevant. And then you've got the biological. Now, biological, there is aspects of non-modifiable. Oh my God, it's going to be good, guys. Non-modifiable in terms of their sex. So female versus male. Female do have a higher rate of bone stress injury in terms of risk. Whether they've had a bony stress injury before, we can't modify that. That's done. There is a bony stress injury history. Also genetic history as well of osteopenia or osteoporosis and a number of other things. So absolutely, I think they're things that we need to know about in our athletes and our clients when we're talking about bone stress injury, either in prevention or in recovery. The other pieces are a little bit more modifiable. So if we're looking at what actually adds to risk, it's things like energy imbalance. So in terms of low energy availability and the associated REDs, relative energy deficiency in sport, a low BMD, so low bone mineral density score, which may be measured via DEXA, and I'll go through that a little bit more in a sec. Low calcium or vitamin D levels or intake. Stress just in terms of daily stress, both physical and psychological, and then also just general diet as well. So we'll cover a bit of that, but as you can see, in terms of prevention, nutrition actually sits front and center in things that we actually can do and are modifiable in terms of reducing someone's risk. So little stats, for example, is if someone has low calcium intake, like around that 600 milligrams per day, they're 6 times more likely to have a bone stress injury. If someone has, what other examples? If someone has, what am I thinking of? In relative energy deficiency in sport, if there is a loss of menstrual cycle, they're 10 times more likely to have a bone stress injury. So there's things that we can absolutely play a part in reducing. And if someone has a bone stress injury, we absolutely have a place in advocating for nutrition intervention, review, screening, and support ongoing. So yes, it absolutely can just be a physical loading issue, but nutrition and recovery in nutrition and sleep can play a really big part in reducing that risk of re-injury, but also in reviewing if that was a component as well. Now, if someone presents with a bone stress injury, what's the approach generally? It is diagnosed via an MRI, most likely, and then also they will hopefully send them to get a bone mineral density scan done via a DEXA. One note there, just so you're aware, is sometimes what happens is that they use bone mineral density scores that may have been given during a DEXA body composition scan. And please don't do that. And please just advocate that they're not a assessment of BMD, for the main reason that DEXA scans, when they give bone density scores back, will use whole of body averages. And if you think about someone's bone density as an athlete, they'll have some areas of their body, say their legs, for example, or depending on what sport, that are higher in bone mineral density than others. And the average actually makes them look like they've got great BMD. The way that we actually want to approach BMD screening is in appreciating the two-site method, where generally what they'll look at is the femur and also a set spine area as well. There are some sports such as rowing that also look at ribs and a few other areas because they're higher risk for their sport. So just keep that in mind, that we definitely need to consider where that's coming from and that the scoring is actually valid. What's next on my list? Alicia's talking fast because she's stressed about time. Anyway, I think the big thing that I wanted to spend some time on is prevention, because I actually feel like that's where we can play a really big part in impacting our athletes' lives, our sporting lives, but also like our contracts and creating like a real return on investment and showing that we are worth the investment as a career as well. And also giving a whole lot of value to our clients and our athletes. So prevention really does like focus on, but also treatment as well, focuses on recovery. So if you can think of this big piece as recovery, it's really, really valid. So first things with recovery is, before you even get into nutrition, is sleep. So if you are within a sports science team and you have access to experts in sleep, then absolutely this is their field. But if you can do the basics and refer on if needed in terms of sleep hygiene, sleep quality, and all those types of things, then please do so. It's such a core part of recovery, and it's a really key part of prevention and also treatment in this regard as well. And then if we move to like nutrition in terms of the recovery side of things as well, a really nice way to look at this is inadequacy, and really like inadequacy of intake, but then making sure that we're focusing on what they need to add in and gaining adequacy in energy levels and different nutrients as well. And a really interesting piece, I guess, is often when we're thinking of recovery, we're thinking about muscle recovery. Like I know I do. And honestly, I would say most of the time that is what's top of mind. Like it's like, okay, getting carbohydrate in for muscle glycogen, we're getting protein in for muscle, all those types of things. But actually in bone recovery, it is really, really important. So if we're allowing our athletes and encouraging our athletes and enabling them to get adequate carbs and protein post sessions and also events, we actually reduce the stress on the HPA axis and support that in decreasing bone reabsorption. God, my words today, and increase bone formation. So not only when we're focusing on that recovery are we optimizing muscle glycogen, we're improving muscle recovery, we're also supporting bone health. So I think adding that into the way we talk to our athletes is important, and also the way that we're thinking of our different strategies is really important too. So we're not just focusing on soft tissue, we're focusing on the whole of body in terms of recovery. So that's one side, that's the acute side. The other side is on all things nutrients as well. It won't be a surprise to most of you that vitamin D is important for bone health. So it's key in bone remodeling. So making sure someone's got adequate vitamin D is really important. So doing requesting blood screenings, making sure intake and also sunlight and all those things are all good. And if you're working with someone in a really long winter, severe winter, then making sure that you're considering all needs in terms of supplementation. You've also got calcium there as well. Sure, that's not shocking either. I've already mentioned it, but it's a bone forming mineral. So you do need some of that there. And some really interesting research, actually I was lucky enough to be at AIS when this research was being done, is looking at calcium supplementation before endurance, where there is a really big, heavy load on calcium usage during those big, hard sessions through sweat loss, but also the formation within the body. To supplement with calcium or have really high calcium intakes before those sessions actually protects bone as well. So they recommend calcium supplementation about 90 minutes before a session, which then helps protect that over the session and also after as well, which is really cool. In terms of iron, I feel like this isn't spoken about enough, but iron's really important in supporting vitamin D. So if ferritin is less than 30, obviously that's below what's optimal for an athlete anyway, but there is an increase in bone reabsorption. So when we're thinking about an athlete, we're not just thinking about their energy in terms of ensuring iron, but it's like the whole of body approach again. And I think if you're looking at iron as well, it also then opens the door to the conversation of energy availability, adequate energy availability, and the crossover of that as well. So lots to kind of break down and make the most of. And now that I've mentioned energy availability, let's stop there and spend some time. So with REDs, or relative energy deficiency in sport, in that time, if someone isn't meeting their energy demands for how much they need for exercise and also for how much their body needs for adequate functioning, there is a lot going on, which we've covered in detail previously, so I won't do that today. But one of the big things that does change is estrogen in both men and women, and that's a key part of bone health. So the thought is that that's the main factor. And a really key part of the messaging to your athletes needs to be around that. So I think when we're reviewing someone, we don't want to just review based around, okay, well, you've had a bone stress injury, let's make sure you're eating enough. It's like, okay, you've had a bone stress injury, let's do a full review of where you're currently at, what your history is, what your days are looking like, and then move on from there. Because I think for most people would be able to do and see things like energy availability. But the big thing is you as a dietitian, for those dietitians and nutritionists here, your superpower is being able to understand the why behind that in terms of what's actually creating that barrier to eating enough, what's creating that piece that is creating that, say, energy deficiency or low energy availability. Is it a training load issue? Is it, an education awareness or cooking skill issue? Is it relationship with food or wanting to make weight? And so many different things. Because if someone comes to you with an injury and your messaging is to eat more, then that may not actually do much and not necessarily have the impact factor for that person at that moment in time, but also in preventing re-injury as well. So lots of things we can do in terms of bone injury, but also bone health. And they're kind of like the big rocks, I guess, to consider when we've got someone in front of you, either wanting the most out of their availability in sport and in life and in overall long-term health, but also for those who are coming to you with an injury and wanting to rehab that and prevent future re-injury. So lots of things, I guess, in terms of nutrition where you do have a seat at the table. It'd be remiss of me not to mention, I guess, the emerging discussion and evidence around gut health and its place on bone health. There isn't enough research as yet for me to give like really specific pieces there, but I think just keeping in mind the impact that gut health has, and also its interaction, I guess, with REDS as well, is a really important key thing just to consider, keep in mind, and optimize in our athletes as much as possible where priority allows. And they're probably like the key things to cover. Before moving to questions, I think probably the few things that we would consider in terms of supplements. Obviously, protein adequacy is something to consider both in prevention, optimizing recovery, and then also maintaining muscle mass in times of immobilization for recovery, rehab, depending on where the injury is at and the severity. We can also consider things like creatine for all the health areas, including brain, soft tissue, performance, all those areas. And a really cool one to also consider with your athletes is collagen. So I think sometimes and often we think of collagen for soft tissue, but it's also really important for bone health formation. So just another one to consider, both in a preventative aspect alongside possibly using it for ligament injury, soft tissue injury, tendinopathies, those types of things, but also in recovery from bone injury as well, both for fractures that may happen due to contact, but also stress fracture or stress reactions. I think I've probably missed some here because I didn't write them down. But if you have questions, then please shoot them through. But yeah, I think that's probably the key things that we'll cover today. So if anyone has any questions, please shoot them through. You're being shy on here today.
Hi, Alicia.
Hello.
Hello. I'm quite interested in the calcium supplementation before the endurance session. I was just wondering if you, I don't know, could point me to where that like research is to have a look
Oh,
at
I
more?
will. Kirst, we might even include that paper in the recording email. It was by Eric Harkinson, epicumen, which is cool. He now works in surfing, I think, but he was in cycling. So they did it in cycling for this specific study, which was really great. And they did it with food. So it was pretty hard. Like, oh, thanks, Tara. It was actually really tricky. Like to watch the athletes do it. Like they were really heavy on calcium, obviously, in this meal 90 minutes before. But the findings were spectacular. Like the only thing I guess to mention is that it was sponsored by Dairy Australia, but having watched how it was put together, I like have no qualms with like the actual amazingness of the research and its findings. Like it was actually really, really cool to see. Obviously, it's not for every session or every event. This is in, endurance-based activities that are high demand. And it seems to be protective and really impressive in terms of the bone markers during exercise and also after. But I'll find that link. Thanks, Tabitha.
Hi, Alicia. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. I just have a quick question on the supplement side of things, especially in the context of maybe like teenage athletes who've experienced bone stress injuries. And like, I guess just trying to wrap my head around what, like, maybe something like, if it's really difficult with diet and they might need to supplement certain things. But I guess the part where I'm kind of wondering if you'd recommend them or not would be things like collagen or creatine and those type of things in like a teenage athlete context.
Yeah, I often go with a 16 up approach with a
Yeah.
lot of this stuff, mainly because it's where they're kind of sitting in the development pathway of their sport a lot of the time, but also consideration of where the research is at and also unavailable because it's very tough to get through ethics, development athlete aged supplement protocols and testing. So I also go through a risk versus reward kind of decision on an individual basis in that example as well, where if I can do everything I can in food first and there's no real limitations to that or huge barriers, then I'll do that with very limited need for supplements. If I get to a point where I'm actually really stuck and there's maybe recurrent injury, really big opportunity compared to risk to use supplements, I might consider supplements with higher research and evidence behind them, which would be like your creatine. I also consider collagen sometimes due to the low risk start of like piece of collagen, and that might be considered in athletes that are like 16 up for me personally when I'm weighing up the risk versus reward. I wouldn't generally, I can say I confidently haven't used it in athletes lower than 16. And it's not to say it wouldn't be helpful. I just don't have any evidence or support that makes me feel comfortable or confident to even know the dosage that I would aim for. And I feel like that in itself is just a prevention. But you can consider things like bone broths, collagen, higher collagen food-based options. You can think about like the gut health side of things that can be food first as well, and then optimizing like the nutrient side. But if there's big limitations, you might consider supplementing things like your calcium, your iron, those types of things in those athletes. But in terms of the performance, oh God, hopefully you didn't hear too much of that, but there's a lot going on behind me. Yeah, that's kind of where I sit. I hope that helps, Rach.
Yeah, that helps heaps, and I think makes perfect sense. I was kind of thinking, I guess, the same thing in my mind in terms of if there's specific things that need supplemented, like for example, like iron or something like that. And there has been like one athlete who had asked me about collagen in the context of it, and she was 17, so I was like, I think that's fine in that context because she's like pretty much there in terms of age and supplements and that sort of thing. So, agree. Yeah, probably a bit like from what you said, I guess, any younger maybe than 16 is probably not relevant at all. Yeah.
Yeah, the other more complex consideration when it comes to development age athletes and supplements is the relative buy-in you can get. So that trust and the buy-in and the sellability of supplements can be really high with those age groups. So if you are going to say no and they're going to completely switch off to everything else you say, it may be worthwhile trying to find like a middle ground with them and alongside them. Like if they've come to you, for example, going, oh, I'm really interested in collagen, I've seen something about it on TikTok or Instagram, like what an awesome opportunity to chat through that, see if it's worthwhile, and make a joint decision rather than it being you saying no straight away at the year of age. So I think it's a really great opportunity to invite them into the conversation rather than out, without a clear no, yes, because I think building autonomy in that age group and confidence and curiosity is such a cool opportunity that we sometimes are quick to say no to, but then actually if we invite them in, they can actually make the right decision for them in that moment in time. So yeah, I love when they come to it. There's lots of negatives with social media, but there's also now some positives as well.
Yeah, and I love your advice there in that lens, exactly like how to, I guess, get the best momentum and get them involved in the conversation, and I guess the best outcome from them off the back of that. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. No worries. Any other questions, guys? Feel free to write them if you don't want to jump on, but we'd love to hear from you. Thank you, Tara, for the nice message, by the way. That's very sweet. The feeling's mutual. Awesome. Well, in saving you all 3 minutes, I could actually finish early for probably the first time in my history of Q&A. So thank you so much for joining. It turns out I didn't have to talk as fast as I did, so apologies there. It was pretty much like listening to me on 2 speed. I didn't have any interruptions coming through the door from my kids. What a win. So a massive thank you. If you would like to join the Academy, we have created memberships to really suit a whole broad range of people and needs, because some people are there just for community, which we love in terms of chatting, debriefing, and just being a part of connection. And others want more of the content, the modules, the mentoring, supervision sessions, all those types of things. So we kind of stagger it in that way just to be able to have a choice that suits you and both financial and also your time commitments. And we'll send a link within that registration so you've got a copy. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. I'll make sure I include some papers in that email as well. And yeah, really looking forward to the next one. And please reach out in the meantime with any questions. Cheers, guys. Bye.